Good morning and welcome, friends. This lodge, as well as many others all over the world, meet on Sundays. Even though we are independent, we work with one another, and also following that advice that RC gave, that there should be communication between lodges. We're in touch with other lodges as well. The movement that brought all this literature out gave a new impulse to our knowledge base that existed in the 19th century, and a lot depends on the study and assimilation of the philosophy that was left for digestion. After 140 years, all of the books are still in circulation. The originals that were brought out by HPV are the only valuable ones, really, that give the truth in those books. So if we are going to study it, then we need to study the correct books. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps for you are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. The work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophies, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. Therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, Krishna is speaking. Thou grievest for those that may not be lamented, whilst thy sentiments are those of the expounders of the letter of the law. Those who are wise in spiritual things grieve neither for the dead nor for the living. I myself never was not, nor thou, nor all the princes of the earth, nor shall we ever hereafter cease to be. As the Lord of this mortal frame experienceth therein infancy, youth, and old age, so in future incarnations will it meet the same. One who is confirmed in this belief is not disturbed by anything that may come to pass. The senses, moving toward their appropriate objects, are producers of heat and cold, pleasure and pain, which come and go, and are brief and changeable. These do thou endure, O son of Bharata, for the wise man whom these disturb not, and to whom pain and pleasure are the same, is fitted for immortality. There is no existence for that which does not exist, nor is there any non-existence for what exists. By those who see the truth and look into the principles of things, the ultimate characteristics of these both is seen. Learn that he by whom all things were formed is incorruptible, and that no one is able to effect the destruction of it, which is inexhaustible. These finite bodies, which envelop the souls inhabiting them, are said to belong to him, the eternal, the indestructible, unprovable spirit, who is in the body. Wherefore, O Arjuna, resolve to fight. The man who believeth that it is this spirit which killeth, and he who thinketh that it may be destroyed, are both alike deceived, for it neither killeth, nor is it killed. It is not a thing of which a man may say, it hath been, it is about to be, or is to be hereafter, for it is without birth and meeteth not death. It is ancient, constant, and eternal, and is not slain when this its mortal frame is destroyed. How can the man who believeth that it is incorruptible, eternal, inexhaustible, and without birth, think that it can either kill or cause to be killed? As a man throweth away old garments and putteth on new, even so the dweller in the body, having quitted its old mortal frames, entereth into others which are new. The weapon divideth not, the fire burneth it not, the water corrupteth it not, the wind drieth not away, for it is indivisible, inconsumable, incorruptible, and is not to be dried away. It is eternal, universal, permanent, immovable. It is invisible, inconceivable, and unalterable. Therefore, knowing it to be thus, thou shouldst not grieve. But whether thou believest it to be of eternal birth and duration, or that it dieth with the body, still thou hast no cause to lament it. Death is certain to all things which are born, and rebirth to all mortals. Wherefore it doth not behoove thee to grieve about the inevitable. The antenatal state of beings is unknown, the middle state is evident, and their estate after death is not to be discovered. What in this is there to lament? Some regard the indwelling spirit as a wonder, while some speak and others hear of it with astonishment. But no one realizes it, although he may have heard it described. This spirit can never be destroyed in the mortal frame which it inhabiteth. Hence it is unworthy for thee to be troubled for all these mortals. Now today's talk belief in rebirth.
Thank you, friends. On rebirth, the fundamentals of the secret doctrine speak of evolution, karma, and reincarnation. These three are all so interconnected, it's very difficult to talk about one without at least mentioning the other. As for evolution, the earth and all things physical was at one time either gaseous or molten, then it cooled, then it altered. Then from the alterations and evolutions, at last were produced all the great variety of things and beings. The total mass of matter, therefore, must have been changed over and over again, and thus been physically reformed and re-embodied or reincarnated, if we think in terms of flesh. The whole mass of matter will all be raised to man's estate when man has gone further on himself. There is no inorganic matter whatever. Every atom is alive and has a germ of self-consciousness. So, key one here. All this is a bunch of atoms. what is now called human flesh is so much matter that has been wholly mineral, vegetable, and animal, and then the human. Mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. All a bunch of atoms of different kinds. What then, we might ask, is the universe for? And for what purpose is man, the immortal thinker, here in evolution? Unlike science, which takes in the part of life, and present religions that keep the element of fear and the image of the Almighty that governs us miserable sinners, the wisdom of the ages makes the universe a vast whole. The old truth solves the riddle of the purpose of man. The old theosophical view paints God and nature in harmonious colors. The compilation of the wisdom of the ages, called Theosophy, says that evolution is all for the experience and emancipation of the soul, for the purpose of raising the entire mass of manifested matter up to the stature, nature, and dignity of conscious Godhood. In other words, the great aim is to reach self-consciousness by transforming and perfecting the entire mass of matter, as well as what we now call soul. Nothing is to be left out. The aim of present man, then, is his initiation into complete knowledge, and for man to affect the other kingdoms below him, that they may be raised gradually from stage to stage to be in time initiated also as human and beyond. No man is dwarfed and belittled, for no one is so originally sinful that he cannot rise above all sin. Humans have systematically eroded and diluted the message of the great sages of the ages. The essence of the message of all these sages was simply to encourage us to live by the laws of the deity, which are also the laws of nature. Their intent was for us to, by following their example, become perfect like them, no matter how imperfect we may seem now. Theosophy holds that we are perfectible because each of us is linked like a ray from the sun to the one source. Each of us as microcosms of the macrocosm have the seed of perfection latent within us. We each must seek out this seed and make it grow to the point where our higher selves take control over the petty passions and desires of our lower selves, to the point where we focus all our efforts not on our own personal salvation, but on uplifting all humanity, physical, nature, and all therein. Yes, we do get help when we are ready, but we must look within, not without, for that help. There is little doubt that modern Christianity's denial of the concept of reincarnation and karma is a reason for the contradiction between the professed ethics of Christian nations and their actual practices, which are so contrary to the morals given out by Jesus. Physical and spiritual evolution can only be carried out by reincarnation. Reincarnation is the most ancient of doctrines. It is accepted by millions in the East, was taught by the Greeks, and is part of the Jewish religion, out of which Christianity was born. Reincarnation was known and promulgated by the very best of the fathers of the early Christian church. It was taken for granted during the time of Jesus. We can find Jesus referring to the concept of reincarnation, including those in St. Matthew chapters 17 and 11. For example, Jesus said that John the Baptist was actually Elias of old, whom the people were expecting. Following Jesus, we find St. Paul in Romans 9 speaking of Esau and Jacob being actually in existence before they were born. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22 has Solomon saying that when the earth was made, he was present, and long before he could have been born as Solomon, his delights were in the habitable parts of the earth. St. John says in Revelation chapter 3, verse 12, that he was told in a vision that whosoever should overcome would not be under the necessity of going out anymore. That is, would not need to be reincarnated. The Theosophists hold that whenever a professed Christian denies the theory of reincarnation, he sets up his judgment against that of Jesus, who must have known more about the matter than the 4th century participants in the Council of Constantinople. Council participants influenced the virtual removal of the concept of reincarnation from the doctrine of the Church. Although alone in reincarnation is the answer to all the problems of life. In it and karma is the force that will make men pursue in fact the ethics they have in theory. It is the aim of the old philosophy to restore the lost card of Christianity to whatever religion has lost it. In The Friendly Philosopher, Mr. Crosby says that karma is law. Knowledge of it begins by performing that which comes to us as duty, simply because it is duty, and not in order to produce anything for ourselves. In time, we do only those things that work for the general welfare. Masters are the highest expression of this. In order to make minds think, Mr. Crosby sometimes pointed out that we know what has been and will be based on what is now. We observe the law and sequence of years, seasons, and elements. This is knowledge and lies outside of memory or prevision. In the same way, we know reincarnation to be a fact without having any memory in the brain of this body. But some do remember, memory often coming by the study and application of a true philosophy of life. The reasonableness precedes the realization. We know the infinitude of numbers, but cannot demonstrate that knowledge, Mr. Crosby says. In more recent times, science has further helped to prove the fact of reincarnation. Jan Stevenson, MD, who served as chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, conducted reincarnation research for 40 years prior to his death in 2007. He was able to objectively validate 1,200 children reporting past life memories. One such child was James Leninger from Lafayette, Louisiana. His mother reported that he would wake up waving his arms and screaming that a plane was going down and the little man can't get out. James remembered names of relatives and associates who validated his very specific accounts of his prior life as James Houston Jr. and the Corvair plane he was piloting when he was shot down near the end of World War II. More information about the work of Dr. Stevenson, as well as the story of James III, can be found at these two websites, which is shown here, as well as a number of other spots on the internet. So while many Westerners have now overcome prior influence, leading them to deny reincarnation, we may have a long way to go before our materialistic indoctrination is overcome and we come to properly realize the fact of reincarnation and damage associated with past misunderstandings. There still are plenty of misunderstandings now. But who or what reincarnates, we might ask? It is not the body, for that disintegrates. It is not the astral body, for that also has its term and goes to pieces after the physical is gone. It is not the passions and desires, although they do have the power to reproduce themselves in each life so long as we do not eradicate them. Therefore, when the separation is complete between the body that has died, the astral body, and the passions and desires, the higher trinity, Manas, Buddhi, Atma, are left. We frequently make a little triangle making the Atma, Buddhi, Manas. That's who we really are. That goes from life to life. So the higher triad constitutes the real man. This real man goes on into another state called Devakan, or dwelling of the gods, until it is attracted back to earth for reincarnation. What stands in the way of the modern Western man seeing this clearly is our long training in materialistic science and materializing religion. Both science and religion have made the mere physical body too prominent. The one has taught of matter alone, and the other has preached the resurrection of the body. Resurrection is founded on what Job says about seeing his Redeemer in his flesh, and on St. Paul's remark that the body was raised up incorruptible. There must have been some esoteric meaning to these statements that goes beyond the literal interpretation that some have made of them. Although reincarnation is the law of nature, the complete Trinity, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, does not yet fully reincarnate into the race. They use and occupy the body by means of the entrance of Manas, the lowest of the three, and the other two shine upon it from above, constituting the God in heaven. Because Manas still walks in the hell of the body and physical life, man is not yet fully conscious, and reincarnations are needed to complete the incarnation of the whole trinity of the body. When this has been accomplished, the race will have become as gods, and the godlike trinity, being in full possession of the entire mass of matter, will be perfected and raised up for the next step. This is the real meaning of the word made flesh. And out of this too comes the idea of the crucifixion, for Manas is thus crucified for the purpose of raising up the thief to paradise. Some have believed that man can reincarnate into animal forms after death. Perhaps this belief is based on the fact that our every thought and action makes an impression on the lower kingdoms. Even our attitude when we eat food impresses on our food, which in turn influences our thoughts and actions, which are transferred to the world around us. But the belief that we can reincarnate into a lower form cannot be further from the truth. Once Manas the thinker has arrived on the scene, he does not return to baser forms. First, because he doesn't wish to, and second, because he can't. For just as the blood in the body is prevented by bowels from rushing back and engorging the heart, so in this greater system of universal circulation, the door is shut behind the thinker and prevents his retrocession. Each human being has a definite character different from each other human being. Masses of beings aggregated into nations show as wholes that the national force and distinguishing peculiarities go on to make up a definite and separate national character. All these differences are due to long experience gained through many lives and are the outcome of the soul's own evolution. Only the persistence and eternal character of the soul accounts for the continuous identity each man feels and knows that he has an individuality of his own. The soul's immortality demands embodiment, here or elsewhere, and to be embodied means reincarnation. One life cannot give the soul the experiences necessary for its development. Reincarnation occurs until the time when the mind is able to overcome the forces which change it to this globe. The early Christian fathers saw this. They taught that the soul had fallen into matter and was obliged by the law of its nature to toil upward again to the place from which it came. That is Theosophy. To see among us those who rise above their circumstances, and those born into the best possible conditions falling on their faces. Many savages have good actual brain capacity, but the ego of their body is still savage. In contrast, many civilized people have a small actual brain force because the indwelling ego has long experience in civilization during previous lives. There is a vast range of powers latent in man which may be developed if opportunity be given. We perceive that we have high aspirations with no time to reach up to their measure, while the great troop of passions and desires, selfish motives and ambitions war with us and among themselves, pursuing us even to the door of death. All these have to be tried, conquered, used, subdued. One life is not enough to do all this. It is not reasonable to suppose that either God or nature projects us into a body simply to fill us with bitterness because we can have no other opportunity here. Rather, we must conclude that a series of incarnations has led to the present condition, and that the process of coming here again and again must go on for the purpose of affording us opportunity that we need. We come back to earth because on it, and with the beings upon it, our deeds were performed, because it is the only proper place where punishment and reward can be justly meted out, because here is the only natural spot in which to continue the struggle toward perfection. Toward the development of the faculties we have and the destruction of the wickedness in us. That is our mission. Justice to ourselves and to all other beings demands it, for we cannot live for ourselves, and it would be unjust to permit some of us to escape, leaving those who were participants with us to remain or to be plunged into a hell of eternal duration. If we assume that upon entering heaven we at once acquire all knowledge and purity, then that state after death is reduced to a dead level, and life itself, with all its discipline, is shorn of every meaning. It is difficult to find a valid argument against reincarnation unless we deny the immortality of man and the existence of soul. We deny that as well. As for recognizing friends and loved ones in heaven, such recognition depends on inner sight and not outward appearance. Sometimes we meet someone and we think we've known them a long time, just by in the first few seconds. Although the soul is immortal and parentless, the ego chooses to be born among a certain environment of friends and family. These egos have a tendency to reincarnate together. Also, we don't remember the deeds of prior lives, but the whole mass of such detail is preserved in the inner man to be one day fully brought back to conscious memory in some other life when we are perfected. And we have all had the feeling of deja vu, and we know of those around us who remember that they have lived before. There's 1,200 cases. Also, in going through lives, we are merely the same person in a different body or costume. And in any suffering not currently understood really links to our own misdeeds in this life or in prior lives. Some assume that souls must be created rather than reincarnated, since the world's population is increasing. But as HPB illustrated, you can't determine how many souls there are just by looking at the world's population at any one time, as there are those between embodiment. This would only be a partial picture, even if we knew that there were countless egos working their way up the mineral, vegetable, and animal chain, and also the human chain, and then on to godhood. So you would have to have a total picture of all this in order to count the number of souls or egos there are. The scientific basis of right ethics is found in reincarnation and karma, and no other doctrine. So interlaced are these laws of reincarnation and karma that it is almost impossible to properly consider one apart from the other. Reincarnation, combined with its twin doctrine karma, explains the misery and suffering of the world, and no room is left to accuse nature of injustice. The misery of any nation or race is a direct result of thoughts and acts of the egos who make up the race or nation. Though the nation may for a time disappear from the physical world, the egos that made it up do not leave the world, but come out as the makers of some new nation in which they must go on with the task and take either punishment or reward as accords for their karma. So individual unhappiness boils down to a result of this prior life, punishment for evil done in past lives, a discipline taken up by the ego for the purpose of eliminating defects or acquiring fortitude and sympathy. Happiness is a result of goodness in this and prior lives. That's the end of the prepared presentation. Question?
A couple of questions, I guess. What are your thoughts on, you mentioned the Bible, that one can infer from St. Paul or St. John, or you mentioned the scriptures there about the possibility of rebirth, but Jesus himself did not speak of rebirth. That's one. I have a couple more.
Uh-huh. Well, I think it was so well accepted then. It's just so assumed. He didn't make, well, it's not a biblical reference to any great detail other than inferences like was just pointed out in the talk. One, it could, parts of the Bible were taken out in the Council of Constantinople. We've seen that in there was a 1945 finding of many writings that took place in the early parts of this about 100 or 200 time frame, which was about the time frame given for when Jesus was here, and they're quite different. There are quite differences. I'm not going to detail it all right now. They're not in my head anyway. But you compare that to the Bible as it is now, and you see that we don't have the original version.
Yeah.
Things have been taken out and so forth.
Well, was convenient or inconvenient for the masses.
This was near a monastery in 1945 when it's thought that a monk at the monastery was concerned that the government was going to confiscate these documents and destroy them. The theory is that he put them in this huge jar and buried them, and they were found by peasants in 1945. That's what I was referring to. So I guess that maybe answers your question on that one.
Another thought. You mentioned the case of a child who apparently died during World War II, and it means that in the literature there is this time period in which a person reincarnates, which is 1500 years. So coming back earlier than that means the unfinished business that people in common parlance talk about, like if you have some unfinished business, you may come back earlier. Is there some reference to that in the study of the research of Mr. or Dr. Stevenson? And second part to that is, are there any references to rebirth from adults remembering past lives, or just children?
Well, he focused on children, but I think what you're getting at is, as we reach the age of 7, we frequently forget whatever we might have remembered, like young James III. His memory faded at about the age of 7. So Dr. Stevenson, I didn't see went into great detail about all of this, except he did mention that, and it's also in the literature that about that age, we tend to forget the past lives if we remember them all at all. You had a number of questions, things in your
Yeah,
question.
it's the 1500 years.
Oh, the 1500 year
gap
average.
between rebirths.
Okay, that also is in the theosophical literature, that it's only an average. The judge put that out to let us know, the kind of stuff. This is for an average person, but if a person who is very spiritual might come back faster, or a person who has no spirituality, and we might want to hear from another person. No spirituality, you might come back right away because there's nothing to assimilate.
Okay. And is there such a thing as unfinished business?
Unfinished business, of course.
What is that?
We all have unfinished business. That's why we come back.
Yeah.
We may choose to come back to help humanity, like you said, that the Buddha came back, not because he needed to. He was already perfected, but he was trying to help humanity.
Since we have a new brain in every reincarnation, how is it? What's the process for which children remember? What's going on there?
Well, it may be the vividness. I like this guy, Dr. Lieutenant Houston, that went down. I mean, it's we heard in hearings last week. If something happened terrible to her, and she really remembered that. It was seared in her memory years later. Trauma. So it could be that, and it could be go on to the next life, But, and you want to follow up on that?
But trauma is in the
could
brain, not in
could
this
be
brain.
many things, yeah. It could be like if you perfect. It's not a brain.
Yeah, but
we have a brain. And we have the brain acts on behalf as an instrument of the mind.
It's not the brain.
But memory imprints the brain with pictures, images. So what's the process for which these children remember?
It's the astral. It's the soul memory.
Okay.
And up to 7, HPV and Mr. Judge explained in many places that the astral is not closed. At 7, when we become mind fields, that it closes.
Okay.
But prior to that, the soul can bring those images forth. It's the soul that is showing you. And the child is innocent. It's pure. It allows all that to come through. But as we grow older, that closes. As the speaker said, it closes. It does not function anymore. And the memory fades away with the kids.
So we have nothing in the current life to contaminate a memory of prior life until we're around 7 years old.
Where the mind is not active until 7. So it's a soul memory. That's
and also a child doesn't make karma of his or her own before the 7th.
That's about
year,
the age of responsibility.
Yeah. It starts at 7 plus 1 day, give or take.
7.
And then another question or comment. Is rebirth or reincarnation the same in Theosophy as in Buddhism? Does Buddhism also take into account the skandhas that we make in each life to take it to the next one? Have you come across that?
Well, in Theosophy, when you're talking about skandhas, we're always constantly giving off skandhas, okay? And we have a way of getting those back for the next life, and the skandhas also influence everything around us. With respect to that part of Buddhism, I don't know that part of Buddhism. I assume it's about the same. With respect to the sex of the inner sanctum of Buddhism, I'm sure it would be the same. It's the same as Theosophy. But the outer parts of Buddhism and Hinduism especially they get into, you know, you can become back as a bird. Some groups do that,
No.
which is not
No.
not what Theosophy
Buddhism
says.
doesn't say that.
Yes, Buddhism doesn't. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll say
Hinduism,
correctly.
yeah.
Buddhism. So
Well, that's
Buddhism is very
superstition.
close to
It's just
Theosophy.
superstition. That's
Yeah.
not real philosophy.
No. Well, that's what happens when you get into the outer thing. You get all these worldly ideas and they're mixed up in there.
No, because the Brahmins, the priests of India, do not correct the errors. They want the public uninformed because then they can rule them. It's the same thing everywhere.
Well, guess what? In the Middle Ages, that's the way it was with Christianity. They tried to keep the people ignorant too. They didn't want them to be able to read. They could read the Bible.
One other comment. Wouldn't the title, excuse me, wouldn't the title for this talk might have been better to put like the law of rebirth instead of belief in rebirth? Because belief, I can believe many things that are not correct.
You're right.
I can believe
Yeah.
that.
The any other comments on that? I mean, I can see belief being including the law. I don't know. Comment?
Yeah. Belief here is not blind belief. Here, belief means knowledge-based acceptance or
Right.
a statement by verifying it according to what you understand of it.
That's the theosophical definition of belief.
So
It's not blind belief.
It's
It is
not
belief.
blind belief like in the Christian religion.
Right.
If you don't accept what the church says, then so you're damned and you're excommunicated and so forth. This is not that kind of belief. Remember what HPB said in the writings, that faith has to actually confirm your imagination.
So we have to have faith, but we also have to also develop the knowledge to carry it forward.
That is also the same thing as being based on knowledge, not on blind faith. It's not blind faith and it's not blind belief either. Someone else is not telling it to you. You can verify it for yourself.
Does that help?
Well, to tell you the truth, I cannot verify any of my past lives right now, so I'm left
You
with
can,
the
but you
belief.
don't know it right now.
Yeah, much later maybe I will.
Yeah, well, that does, you know, as we come into the current body, generally speaking, I think we lose that memory of past life, and you get you get indications, but we probably pass by most of them. Like one was mentioned, you meet someone and it seems like you knew them before.
Mhm.
Might have been your relative, you know, in a prior life. A close friend or something.
Who decides when the soul is perfected?
Who decides when
Or
the soul is
how is it
perfected?
decided?
When one acts totally unselfishly with super knowledge all the time.
That you have attained to.
That's
But
right.
who makes the decision?
You do.
And then you come. Then
If you make such a decision, you're probably not perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
You either are or you are not. When you're perfected, you become part of the
When you're
all.
perfected, you don't even
Whom
think
would you
about
be
it.
asking? The all? You know, obviously, because you're there. You perceive it.
When you're totally in sync with nature,
You perceive it.
you have to know it internally, and I don't know that there are words to even.
To express
Say
it. There isn't any such. And that verification we talked about, there are indications when you wake up, there are imprinted images so bright, so real, that you know that it didn't come from this plane of existence, whatever the soul wants to tell you will tell you, but it is not in language, it's in symbology that it expresses itself. And everyone, I'm sure, has had experiences like that, that it lets you know it's there. And it's not based on belief or acceptance or anything. It's your own inner experience that shows that the path you are on is correct for you or otherwise.
That inner feeling which we tend to ignore, and then it gets quieter and quieter if we keep ignoring
A lot of people ignore these signs because it's not expedient for them to acknowledge it.
Well, it flies in the face of what we have to deal with, and
not only that, we're in families, perhaps the only one that has that inner sensibility active, and everybody around us constantly tells us that they are not in it. It's very isolating in a sense to stand up to your own inner guidance. It becomes a solitary way, but that's the way it is. And you have to...
It's a solitary journey.
You have to be willing to walk it or not. But, you know, other people cannot tell us what to do about it. It's internal to each human soul.
We
and
can,
it's the
we
soul
can learn from
showing
others,
itself.
but we have to really, we have to apply it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And before we can really get it.
Yeah, and also
And
that it gives you that responsibility also that you're the one who's perceiving it. So you have an obligation to try to move all the others in this direction. And HPV says it's all the way uphill, because of the society around us not having this ideology that is implanted in us at the beginning of the Manvantara activated yet. So a lot of them, I think she calls them asleep or dead units because it's not active yet. And we have to go against that stream that also pulls at us, because there are individuals who come, find the real philosophy, and for some personal reason they drop off.
yeah, they drop off because they're listening to everything around them.
Yeah, it's
And
too
it's a very
attractive and they
dangerous
get
situation.
pulled out of it.
So, and there's criticism of ULT on the net. You go out and look. Oh, you should be listening to this or that or the other. You know, well, I think the when you see the sages of the ages keep putting the message out over time, and it gets corrupted. You know, you come to realize, you know, I need to try to find the true message and stay with it.
Yeah,
So,
it's very hard to do. So
It is very difficult.
It's very difficult because, as I said, we have the family obligations, and then we have the country obligations, community obligations, and we're being pulled at from all different directions. To stay with the mainline Theosophy becomes really a lifetime effort.
Yeah. And there's always just the few, because HPV dedicated the voice of the silence to the few. And we can see ourselves today, it's the few. So
Yes, but you should not depend on the physical plane alone, because the mind is expansive. It has telepathic abilities in all directions, because it gets recorded on the astral plane. So don't underestimate that.
No,
There are a lot of minds out there that are seeking for this philosophy, but you have to also remember this is not a societal norm anymore to go to a place to listen. Most of the younger people are on some kind of Twitter, you know, one of them things.
Not even thinking through
Facebook,
anything.
Twitter, that kind of modality. And people who call us say, I have seen your program, it's really very interesting, I'm very interested in it, but I don't have the time to come. I don't have the time to come on Sunday. We had a couple this week like that. And one person came all the way from Virginia, and at the end of the talk, and whoever was here, we all stayed and talked to him. So Sandra was there with
Her mother.
her mother that day, I think, and we accommodated him and answered all of his questions. And he said he had just
Gave him
finished
some
college
literature. Yeah,
and
just finished
haven't
college.
seen him since. There are people looking for this philosophy, no doubt about it, because that young man's mind was totally acclimated to the universal principles of our existence. So that's a very young mind, just graduated from college. So there are people out there looking for it.
Well, he's trying to get settled. He's trying to get a job. He may be back. You never know. You just got to stay focused, understand, continue to try to understand the message.
So we touched a lot of
Analogy,
people.
correspondence, and even in the physical world, we can, through analogy and correspondence, realize that there's a far deeper story there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But and we can't really totally. If you pay attention to numbers, especially numbers in attendance and things like that,
But there's a
you're
lot
going to
of
lose
us
it
around.
because
Now
people.
remember, there are little lodges all around the universe.
There are
All
lots
around the
there's-
globe we meet today, there are a lot of us,
There are
not just
lots-
in one place.
There are lots of the few,
No, there's a lot of us because we're scattered everywhere.
right?
In every country we are available. We're there.
And it's up to us, really,
Yeah.
to try to keep it going.
Absolutely.
And was there any other questions or comments? Well, we'll
Thank you.
bring it to a close. Thank you for coming. And next Sunday,
Hypnotism lessons,
and there's also an afternoon meeting too next Sunday,
round table.
12:30 round table on the Gita. So, thank you.
Thank you.